I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar covering the topic of harnessing the power of AI, bridging the gap between theory and practice. I'm so thrilled to be able to introduce our expert panelist today. This is a tackle that is quite dense, so I'm going to cover together, we're going to be able to cover a number of different aspects, and this is why this webinar is very exciting for us. Now, we've got Francesco, for example, who's an AI architect and an engineer. He specializes in bringing immediate value to clients through the implementation of AI-first processes. So he's got a diverse background in successfully bringing AI into finance, using through a startup, and having had some of the world's biggest banks as clients. Francesco has a keen understanding in scalable solutions, common pitfalls, and emerging opportunities in the industry from an engineering perspective. Now, what we have also with us is Lee, and Lee is joining us as a tech entrepreneur and an award-winning innovation expert in governance, risk, and compliance. He's got deep skills in AI and information security governance. He's got 20 plus years in the field, and Lee is an author of a book called The Human AI Alliance, and he leads Dawn Horizon, his company that pioneers solutions in ISO 42001 and 27001 compliance. He's a dynamic speaker and a true innovator shaping the future in responsible technology. With us, we also have Casper. He has an extensive background in banking and IT. He's got 25 plus years under his belt working for a large bank, where he gained, amongst other experiences, work in anti-money laundering and cybersecurity. In recent years, this has also included topics in AI and quantum. So together, we will discuss 3 of the most common limiting factors for companies looking to harness the power of AI. First of all, data quality and availability. I'm going to say many companies, but it's probably the vast majority of companies struggle with accessing high quality, relevant, and sufficient data to train AI models effectively. Obviously, number 2, regulatory and ethical concerns. So companies will face challenges in navigating the complex regulations and ensuring that data privacy and ethical concerns related to AI are addressed. And unfortunately, now with the speed of process, number 3 would be a lack of skilled talent. There's a significant shortage in professionals with expertise in AI because it's such a new topic, and machine learning and data science. So I'm so glad that you're all here to join us in this webinar, and we're going to get started first off with Francesco. So at the baseline, we need to talk about data quality. So many companies, Francesco, are struggling with data quality and availability. Are there steps that organizations can take to ensure that they have the right data for their AI initiatives?
Thank you. So what we see in today's digital landscape is that organizations are drowning in valuable data from customers and visitors. This data contains critical insights, but it's scattered across disparate sources, existing in incompatible formats, and typically in an unusable state. The data lakehouse architecture, however, has emerged as a powerful solution to keep all of this data centralized through the use of delta tables. These tables provide the versatility to store both structured and unstructured data, while theoretically allowing for infinite compute and scale. And so you can do this serverless, or you can do this with your own compute clusters. And it's actually Databricks who pioneered this approach, and it is so successful that it currently is the beating heart of companies such as ASML, Citizen M, Stadin, or ARAG. And it's successful because Microsoft is now coming out with its own copy, which is Azure Fabric.
That's a good sign.
Yeah. So my recommendation for that is for companies who want to get their data in order, the first step is to consolidate all of their data onto the data lake by simply connecting their existing data sources to, let's say, Databricks. Once done, data scrubbing becomes essential for AI readiness. This includes automated pipelines for standardization, deduplication, handling missing values, outlier detection, all done to balance the data. So a critical challenge often encountered is dealing with unbalanced data sets that underrepresent certain customer segments or business scenarios. This can lead to biased AI models and suboptimal business decisions if not properly addressed. We've seen this with the Goldman Sachs credit card for Apple, where women didn't get a credit score, but their husbands got a great credit score. All this must integrate with governance systems for lineage tracking, version control, and identity and access management, i.e. the same that we've seen in the database world, but now on a much larger scale. And once we have this properly clean data and automated self-correcting training pipelines, organizations can then develop accurate predictive capabilities, create automated decision systems, and enable self-service analytics for business users through, for example, Power BI, and have the dashboard ready to ensure data quality remains high, spot regression, and to provide production-ready AI models. So, for example, recently I set up a Databricks instance to consolidate the Google Analytics, inventory data, and web tracking for a large flower seed vendor. And by unifying these data sources, I delivered a Gen AI-powered chat application that advised customers on purchases and plan care and could actually make the purchases for them through the chat. With Databricks MLflow, making the recommendations was nearly automatic. It was just a couple of buttons. So we knew ahead of time what the customers wanted once they started chatting. This approach revealed an entirely new customer segment, actually, that had previously abandoned the purchase funnel. And that pattern was only discovered through the centralized data that we suddenly had available and the AI analysis that we hooked into it. The data lake scalable architecture made it possible to convert these potential customers into actual buyers on scale, demonstrating how proper data integration enables AI to uncover hidden business opportunities. Now, this is something that to me is obvious as a domain expert, but I see many clients surprised by. And what I'm trying to say is that the business case is there for many more opportunities than you think. And I think that Casper is the perfect person to tell you more about this, actually.
Oh, fantastic. Now I'm really, really looking forward to this. So because I'm hearing so much about our banking customers are coming to us and asking about data, personalized data that can help provide just almost a one-to-one relationship where the customers, which just isn't possible if you're starting with a block of data that is disparate, unclean, as you said, biased. So yeah, obviously we're looking at this within, like, just as a sample example. But Casper, you might be able to let us know about, once we've covered data quality and availability, which is a big ask in itself, what do you reckon would be important to consider when thinking about applying AI in a company?
I think the first part is really to identify the business case. What is really what we want to get out of applying AI? Why? Where do we want to apply it? What are the benefits of AI? And then, of course, potentially the less benefits we have in other areas where we do not apply it. And how do we want to manage AI? And it's very important to have that kind of that idea, and also that people are really aware of what AI can mean overall for their own organization as well, for their own roles and activities. So in order that it's important that people are aware, that is the people who are using it, the people who are implementing it, and also the people who are ultimately responsible for AI. And a lot of the legislation, and Lee will come on back to that one later anyway, is that it's the responsibility more and more for these kind of things within the board, or the C-suite, as we call it in Ireland. So it's important that the C-suite is aware what they need to do and what it can bring for them when they apply AI. Some studies recently, last year in ISACA, it said that 15% of the organizations have some AI policies in place, which is not a lot, which means
no, it really
85
isn't.
not. It's also some board members are not really aware of what AI is. Deloitte did a study last year, and it said that only 2% have a good understanding of AI. So it's those kind of things are quite important. So as an organization, it's important to know what you're kind of getting yourself into. And at the same time, a lot of parties are also thinking like, oh, I'm afraid to miss the boats. I need to implement AI. Well, that might partly be true to take advantage of the opportunities. It's also good to be aware of the different risks. And Francesco already mentioned, and you as well, Yves, that the bias of data is one element. It's also the bias of algorithms. If you've got an algorithm which is focusing on the profit and only the profit, it might deliver products which are not as safe. And that might have then an impact, and not perhaps the first year, but perhaps the year thereafter on customers' feedback, and then in the end, the profitability as well. And of course, if some product is unsafe, it might even impact people getting injured and so on. So it's important to really consider with AI the opportunities as well as the risk, and the risk then of bias. There's another risk as well related to personal data. That's something probably more up to your street, Yves, as well. And that is important because AI can handle lots of data, and that means that it needs to be done in a secure way. So there's lots of things what you can do about those things. With the biasm, you can make sure that you test whether things are still fair. Look at the input, look at the output, make sure that it is in a secure or in a fair way done. Could also be make sure that you have some user oversight to make sure that when the decision is made by an AI, it's more a proposal, and that you are understanding why your tool has done a certain decision, but also with sensitivity of personal data and so on, ensure that you only have data which is really used or useful for making certain decisions. And if some data which is personal is not relevant to it, then remove that. And then, of course, you've got also the risk, although it sounds a bit negative, but the risk of not complying to legislation. It's very important. There's a lot of legislation, also in more recent months, I would say, or in nearly weeks, where legislations came out, and it's important that the companies who are thinking of AI are considering the responsibilities they have with the legislation.
Yeah, the governance is going to be absolutely essential. Do you find that in your discussions with clients, they are sometimes thinking 10 steps ahead? So the buzzword at the moment is agent AI or agentic AI. And is it sometimes a little bit difficult to kind of like peel them back and just like, do you have an AI policy? Do you know, are you tackling bring your own AI, your BYO AI that Lee was referring to earlier on, which I think is a fantastic term. It's just like your employees are using AI. Are you ready for this?
Correct. No, I think it's a very good point. And that is very important to know. Are they already applying it? Are they using it already in the organization? And how much reliance do people have? Is it ChatGPT to get some few bullet points in preparation for a presentation I want to make? Or is it more for making certain decisions or doing a research, etc.? So those kind of things are very important. Indeed, some companies want to jump ahead and think like they need to use a certain tool, whether it's an AI agent or something like that. But again, it comes back to the business case. What do you want to use it for? And will it bring you the benefits for your organization overall? And that is kind of the balance. So sometimes you need to bring them a step back, not to just jump into it. And at the same time, of course, AI has lots of opportunities. So we all want to be part of or in exploring the opportunities. So that's kind of the balance everybody, individuals and organizations certainly need to take.
And I'm glad you're guiding them through this. So you mentioned regulation. Do we want to delve into the regulation with Lee now? You know, it's such a huge topic, but I know Lee is so thankfully so enthusiastic about it. And maybe Lee, you could tell us a little bit about the worries that companies would have that regulatory and ethical concerns could like hinder AI adoption, like either across the company or as consumers might have concerns about it. So how do you reckon companies could navigate those concerns?
Yeah, thanks, Eve. So I think firstly, the relationship between regulation and innovation is often framed as a zero-sum game. And this is very derivative and a very simple argument. And the argument typically goes, regulation stifles innovation by burdening businesses with compliance costs. Now, there are costs. Let's not beat around the bush, but let's think about it a little bit more deeply. So a well-crafted regulation that actually fosters innovation is typically one that is sound, or grounded in sound ethical principles and fundamental rights. So rights like equality, rights like freedom, rights against exploitation, which I think is a really big one in this context, right? And so if we have legislation that is grounded in those principles and those ideas, it can be a catalyst for innovation. And actually, most importantly, it will drive benefits for society as a whole. So a really good one. And again, I've chosen an example which is not in the technology space, which is around intellectual property rights. So again, if regulation is clear, predictable, and grounded in ethical principles, it can be a solid foundation for businesses to go, that's actually a great idea. Let me invest more. Let me go forward with that idea because my intellectual property will be protected. There is, of course, the negative side of that, which it can also create patent wars, monopolies, and government interference. But in the best sense of it, it will actually increase in investment and most notably innovation. So I think we mustn't get kind of hung up on the idea that every piece of regulation always stifles innovation. And it also provides a framework for businesses to actually go forward. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But just one last thing on this is that having a balance between the protection of individual rights, ethics, and a free market will result in innovation coming to the fore. So if we contextualize that now within the EU AI Act, the Act places fundamental rights, health, and safety of EU citizens at the heart of this regulation. So again, from a principle perspective, it is really kind of focusing on that transparency, accountability, and human oversight, which will be essential for making sure that humanity goes forward, I think at a kind of a much larger viewpoint. But just from a European perspective, is AI that is being deployed into the marketplace, is it safe? Is it ethical? Is it going to affect the health of EU citizens, and is it going to affect their fundamental rights? So these are really, really important elements. The last month, on the 2nd of February, the AI literacy component of the Act came into effect. Now, what that means is that companies need to invest in AI literacy, and that is from developers to boardroom. Now, AI literacy is not just the technical elements, which is, how do I employ Databricks to create a data lake, or how do I deploy AI? It is also the legislation piece. It is also how do I deploy it safely and ethically, and then how do I make sure that my dev have the latest and greatest tools and tricks available to them. And all of this is really just to make sure that you understand your risks and, most importantly, your opportunities. Because Francesco immediately identified several opportunities that he's been working on, and that just articulates the reason why we need AI literacy. And again, not kind of getting hung up on the idea that regulation is going to be bad. It has the potential to be good, because by having these frameworks, you can actively understand how you're going to be implementing a product into the marketplace that is going to address any ethical issues before it gets onto the marketplace, because that's really one of the most important pieces. Is the AI Act is both a product safety legislation as well as a fundamental rights. So what that means is you need to test your products before they get to the marketplace. The last bit that I want to just touch on is that there's not only regulations, because although the EU AI Act is a groundbreaking piece of legislation, it is focused on the European Union. There is a wider opportunity for organizations outside of the European Union to use a framework like ISO IEC 42001. This is an international standard developed by ISO, and it's for the implementation of an AI management system. Most organizations are familiar with ISO 9000, which is a quality management system. So this is a quality management system for AI. And what that does is it provides a standard for responsible AI adoption and providing a balanced approach to risk mitigation and fostering innovation within those ethical boundaries. And that basically provides a basis for building trustworthy, managed AI products throughout their life cycle. And it doesn't really matter where you deploy them. If you have these basic fundamental building blocks around starting from a place of ethics, starting from a place of fundamental rights, ultimately you're able to frame regulations and standards as innovation accelerators and get everyone AI literate as quickly as possible. And therefore, we can all benefit from responsible, ethical AI.
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah, no, it's great. In the current political climate, we know that EU with GDPR has led the front in terms of regulation for privacy, for the rights of the individual, and how the data is managed, which ultimately means that the way AI models are built need to incorporate all of these rules. But at least with ISO there, which is a standard, but it isn't, so it's not a regulation. It's wonderful that ISO did step up and build these, and it was just released in 2023. Was that correct?
That's correct. So in 2023, it was released, end of 2023, and then at the end of 2024, the auditing frameworks for the standard were released. But this was created and developed at an absolutely rapid rate. And it kind of is a testament to the idea that this is going to be an absolutely groundbreaking piece of technology. And we need to have a quality management system. And yeah, congratulations to ISO for pushing it as hard as they did to get it out as quickly as they have.
So that those sets of standards, again, ISO 42001.
There you go.
And now if we peel it back again, and thank you, Lee, for this. And I told you he's passionate about the Human AI Alliance. How do we now incorporate, those are the books, the rules, the regulations, and that cover our ethical concerns. How do we feed it back into the sort of system architecture? So we know what we need to do. How do we make sure that our tools or the systems that we build around the AI products that we build actually incorporate these regulatory and ethical concerns?
So that's actually a question I'd love to answer, because when it comes to transparency in AI systems, it used to be really hard, actually. But now the approach fundamentally depends on the type of AI that we're implementing. With traditional machine learning models, transparency can nowadays normally be achieved actually quite easily. Using, for example, Databricks, we can implement feature importance analysis that shows exactly which data elements influence decisions and to what degree. We get a nice little dashboard. We see, oh, this decision was caused by this factor, these factors, and eventually it was this single factor that actually made, for example, I don't know, this person eligible for this position, yes or no. But for large generative AI models, or what we call LLMs, ChatGPT, these present a different challenge that honestly merits its own discussion and know-how. But but summed up in a nutshell, is that in my personal experience, I found that the key to developing these architectures is appropriate monitoring and control that match the risk and maturity level of the application. It's obvious, but you still need to do it. By combining this with the correct level of technical infrastructure with governance, solutions can then be developed quickly, and all the needed departments within an organization can slowly and safely warm up to AI becoming a staple of their operations. Because, of course, it's not just the engineers that are building the AI. Legal also has an opinion about it. HR also has an opinion about it. Like, everyone that's entangled in the system, like, not only has an opinion about it, but also has to get used to it. and probably has some pretty good constructive feedback. And that's actually one last point that I want to harp back on the fact with transparency. And this was already mentioned by Lee tangentially, is that this transparency means also knowing what your AI model actually does. And when you're developing it, you can think of it like if you know the components of how a combustion engine actually works, you can make it more efficient, you can make it work better. So this force to actually have to make your solution transparent can actually end up helping your end product.
100%. I mean, this is where, again, the AI literacy comes in, because if you're expecting HR to step in and go, actually, I think this particular module needs to be, this is never going to happen. So the whole company needs to understand that the data that is going to be bolstering the AI products will sit in across the company, and as you said, legal will get involved. So how do you ensure that companies are ready to have these conversations cross-functionally and collaboratively in order to build these products in a way that satisfies the regulatory concerns, satisfies the privacy concerns, that and also, as Casper said, that fosters the growth of the company based on what the business goals are. So maybe if we talk a little bit, we've tackled AI literacy earlier on, but we might delve into that a little bit more to ensure that these conversations are happening within companies and actually fostering these conversations. But are we? How would you suggest? Maybe we lean on Casper with this, and I expect Lee will want to jump in too. How do we build on top of these systems a way to audit how the AI is behaving? Because with the as complex as the models are becoming, there's a chance that changes will happen that haven't been foreseen, etc., etc. So then again, referring back to the Human AI Alliance, we will need to work with the technology in order to make sure that it continues to behave as expected. So Casper, you might help us out, hopefully, looking into the future with quantum, but how would you see the importance of AI audits within the companies?
Well, they're very important. We talked about a few things before, all four of us, about the different risks and so on. But the main thing is again, with any system, is that the AI system is working as intended to do. So, of course, then you have to think about your unbiased and the fairness of the system. You have to think about that it is reliable and transparent. Yeah, that's a term as well used by Francesco, and that it complies to the legislation, including the ISO 42001. Those kind of things are very important. And if you build it into kind of your process around your system, with, for example, a second line control testing, that's when you kind of start guaranteeing that the system still behaves as you intended to do. Testing could be done, that's then kind of an audit by the second line, or even embedded in the first line when you have your user oversight. You can do it by an external party to do it kind of more or less part of an external audit. It's those kind of things which are key to make sure that you continue with a safe environment where AI is applied and managed correctly. Difficulty, of course, is that AI is a relatively new topic, as we all know. Certainly how fast everything has been done, and then the complexity around it. It's sometimes really much more like a black box than you have with computer systems, because with computer systems you can look at the different codes. With AI, it's kind of, there is no code around it. It's using the data, etc., what is being given. So that's one other challenge. Of course, the irony is that the auditors, and certainly the external auditors, are actually using AI tools to do the audits, often much more on doing or helping them with the testing. but it's still an element there which is to think about. But yeah, there's a few things there where audits are very important, and that you can do it on a kind of regular basis. And even within the organization, you can look at if you use a male as an applicant for, say, for example, for a loan. I came from banking. What is the output there? And if it's a female, what will be the output then? Or if a person lives in a different part of the society, or in a city or in a suburb, is it still correct? Is it still the same result, or is it already different, and can you not explain why it is different? So those kind of things you can take into account. And then, of course, and I think Lee, perhaps more for you, the testing on legislation, that's an element there as well, what could be done, where you kind of test or audit on whether your system is still compliant or fits in the legislation which is applicable to you or your company.
Thank you.
Yeah, Casper. I think when you're thinking about 42001 or the EU Act, you need to kind of contextualize your application, because basically the first piece of the puzzle, as I mentioned, is determining what your application is that you're putting into the marketplace or that you're implementing within your organization, and how it is going to be used and how it is going to be impact the users of that particular tool. So that kind of almost sets the stage in terms of how you're going to assess it before it gets to market, and then you're going to assess it after market, essentially. So that talks to and essentially your entire AI life cycle that you need to audit. So that kind of starts going into kind of continuous auditing and conformity. So just a couple things from an EU AI perspective. Depending on your impact onto users, you will be tiered or categorized based on a risk level, and I'll get into the risk levels later. But essentially, if you end up in a high risk, you're going to have to start implementing quality management system, conformity assessments, third-party conformity assessments. You might even need to do some testing with a regulatory body within your organization, within your country, before you put it onto the marketplace. But just some basic things from a 42001. So this is if you're implementing an AI platform in your organization and you want to take a responsible route. Basic risk management system. So that would be the governance around that, including what would be your acceptance tolerant levels for risk, data governance practices. So Francesco actually spoke about the different tool sets, and so did you, Casper. But in order to be able to actually embed that into the organization so that there is consistency in it, so as teams move on or people move on, the actual organization maintains and holds that knowledge. So you're going to need to have those practices documented and then maintained, and that will be where your audit comes in, so that you're actually validating against that, because you've identified the risk that there could be a slide in the quality of your data governance. You implement your control sets, and then Casper, from a second line, you would come in and do those particular technical audits. But again, you need that, let's call it business level view on what are the right practices around that. Another key element, both from a 42001 perspective and from an EU Act perspective, is the technical documentations of the application that you're implementing or putting it into the marketplace. So that would be implementation guides, user guides, record keeping, change management, and if you did any change management, what are the has it been done in a way that is communicated clearly, that it's transparent. And then you start getting into, again, the more technical elements around that, which would be around outputs, and putting in place the right processes to consistently test against that. I think the key there is really just to kind of have the transparency, not only at the output layer, not only at the data layer, but also at the business layer. And when I talk about that, I'm saying, do you have a risk register with risk tolerance? Do you have an AI policy? Do you have roles and responsibility? Do you have a full product life cycle? How are you managing in that? What are the artifacts that would support that? And are you doing any kind of impact assessment on your users? Again, around fundamental rights, but yeah, those would be the core artifacts at a business level that would support transparency.
Fascinating, because really what I'm hearing, and by the way, we have a Q&A option for anybody who is our attendees. If you have questions that are coming up in the discussion, please do feed them into the Q&A box, and we'd love to cover them during the webinar. What's coming forward to me there is not just about the usual conversations that we've had with our clients to date, which is around data quality, data governance, setting up your systems, making sure you're fully up to date on the regulation, make sure the teams are trained, etc., etc. There's almost a new function that's going to be required in small, medium, and large companies around AI management. So exactly what you're saying is just while you might have the transparency and the systems set up correctly and everything's going fantastically well, you need to have that added layer of sort of the AI audits that Casper discussed, and feeding this information back to the clients, the customers, and the public at large to have documentation to prove that the work has been done. And that's going to be, I don't think that's a piece that's been tackled at the moment. Would you say in your experience, Lee?
That is definitely a piece that is missing. Because I think from a technology perspective, the original kind of noise necessarily that was coming down to the devs would have been, we need to see what's happening in this black box. So that would have created levels of transparency, which Francesco spoke about within Databricks. But that still doesn't answer the question, which is, what are my risks? What are my actual risks inside my business that I need to address? And so once you've identified what those potential risks are, let's say you've got bias, okay, fine. So what are the potential biases within my data, right? Let's break it down into a control set. So these are my controls that I've got. One of them is Databricks. One of them was the visibility tool that Francesco mentioned in Databricks. Fantastic. But what happens when I do a change, or I start to add new data and there is kind of a fade in the quality outputs now? How do I address that? What are my change mechanisms around that? How do I do a rollback around that? So you start getting into incident management, change management, and then of course you start talking about safety as well. So what happens if something goes wrong within the AI application? How am I going to address safety? How am I doing quality checks around the safety of those tool sets that are coming in? So it's not only just around the technical controls, you need that layer above around the risk management. And again, once you've got that risk management, you need the policies and procedures and standards documented to support the risk management that gets down to the controls layer. So again, when Casper rolls in with his team of auditors, they actually have something, because now they go, oh, right, yeah, no, we've got this over here, but where's your policy? Where's your risk register? How are we going to do an audit if we don't have a risk register and we understand what the contextual environment of your business is within the industry?
What are we testing for? And where are we testing? And who's been managing it day to day, and et cetera, et cetera. That is... would you suggest, in your experience, and all three of you in the conversations, would it be fair to say that there's a bit of an AI talent gap at the moment, in terms of a gap where companies are trying to be over here with their AI capabilities, and in theory they're just nowhere near the abilities to kind of like jump and go into that change management piece? Would any three of you want to, in your experience, discuss like suggestions on how to upskill? You know, the topic here is bridging the gap between sort of the theory of what we're trying to do and like in practice. How would we manage? How would you suggest you manage the talent piece?
Yeah. I can jump on quickly on that, Eve. I think there's certainly a gap that is in more parts of different sectors, but certainly on the AI, there's certainly a gap there. There's not even enough people who have got a lot of experience. So there's certainly elements. So it really all starts with getting an awareness of what AI can do, and what then the boundaries around it is. That is a very important first step to kind of do it. you always have people within an organization who have a bit more feeling for whether it's a technical piece or for something innovative, who are getting enthusiastic about that. So those people can then be more engaged. But first of all, it's important that as an organization, you know what you actually think of achieving. And I'm not saying that we need to do a completely waterfall and do a 2-year study to identify what you can do, but you need to understand what are the boundaries in which you can start having a look at AI and what do you expect and how can you continue on an ongoing basis that you are managing the different parts of the tool or wherever you apply AI to, that is still fit for purpose and meets the intention.
And would you say, Casper, in a case where a company just has, again, a lot of business goals, but not really a sense of where they're at in terms of their sort of maturity around data and AI, from all the different pieces that we've covered so far, are your policies in place? Do you have the right talent? What are your systems looking at? Where your data? Would you suggest sort of discovery phases with them? Just get a couple of experts in, 6-8 weeks. We'll deep dive and give you sort of almost like a health check. Would that be something that that companies benefit from?
I think certainly, and that could be with external people, could also give internal people some time for themselves to kind of explore it. There's a lot of things, and it again start small, a bit like the agile then, but start small, but at least know the direction where you want to go to. That I think is key. So there's a lot of things. External companies can help, but make sure that you use the right companies for the right element. But again, that all comes back. You need to know already within the C-suite, you need to know already which questions to ask. So that's kind of where the first perhaps step needs to take place. Make sure that within the board, your C-suite, that you are aware what AI could potentially mean for your organization, and then to take it from there.
Yeah,
I step in.
Yep.
So, sorry. So just from kind of picking up from where Casper left off, was what I would recommend is actually setting up an AI committee with kind of core stakeholders from across the business. What that does is it allows for areas of potential excellence to pick up a project that can then be the pilot project that runs through. So if within that center of excellence, you've got marketing, you've got procurement, you've got finance, IT, et cetera, security, or even audit. And from that, individual pilot projects can either be developed or a single one, which allows for the collapsing of multiple disciplines. That would be a really good step in the right direction with the AI literacy piece. And then that breaks it down into kind of more manageable areas and chunks. And then from an external perspective, actually put somebody into that from an external perspective to provide advisory services. And again, looking at the different layers of expertise that would be needed around data governance, information security, cybersecurity, bias quality or data quality. And then you can actually drive, I think, early wins quite quickly. And then from that learning, accelerate your kind of vision for AI. Because by doing that and aligning with a AI committee, you can actually bring those original strategies that were developed at a C level into a working group essentially, and drive it forward within the business with the leaders of those different functions.
Fantastic point. Then again, the people inside know what they're trying to achieve. And Francesco is going to have the piece around engineering. How does that work?
Yeah, so I completely stand behind what Lee says. It's a very elegant solution because you need to prioritize what gives the most value, obviously, to actually see what am I going to spend my resources on. But I do think that we currently have a large gap in talent that is something that I see very much also within the industry. I do want to say that I also see an incredibly talented wave of young AI professionals. So I think we're in a drought now, but think in the coming 5 to 10 years, like I work with people, they're spectacularly talented. And I think we're going to get like incredible AI solutions, which is going to be so much cooler for businesses that have made AI part of their process. But to go back on what Lee said, I think it's very important in this phase, like in this state that the industry is in, to really carefully pick who you're going to get as an AI specialist to work with you, because you need to have the value, but you also need to know what is feasible and what is not feasible. And because AI is so hyped right now, I mean, an anecdote that always comes to mind is that I once encountered an AI architect who 2 months before that had been doing PHP, and this is no slander to PHP developers, but PHP for 20 years, and then just 2 months ago decided, you know what, I'm just going to architect the whole solution. And you came into it, and it was, and again, this is not that PHP devs are bad, but AI architecture was a mess. You're just like, the client came in and they called me and they're like, why isn't it working? And I looked at it and I went, well, of course it's not working. You don't have a specialist for this. This is like, you made an electrician do a plumber's job. That makes no sense. It's just, so what I see is really pick your specialists, because there are a lot of valuable cases that the C-suite can delineate, and then the feasibility and how that architecture gets put up. That's what you need the specialist for. And once that's set up, then within your own organization, you can do the AI upskilling. And if that architecture is good, if it's sound, your organization can grow on it. You're not dependent, and you shouldn't be dependent on that specialist. They should just make sure that you kickstart in the right direction, and then whenever you need some help, they're there.
That's your base level. Yeah. And again, the AI is moving so fast. I find myself as the head of data and AI practice at CubeMatch in a fantastic place, because I'm always so curious about the next big step. And like I talked about, like I mentioned quantum earlier on, but I really want to ask Casper, in your experience, again, just looking at the theory and the practice, but also kind of looking into the future, how close are we to seeing quantum computing being used in practical AI applications? I just looking into your crystal ball.
It's interesting. The last few years, and even in the last few months, a lot of companies say like, well, it will be a few years ahead. And at the same time, there is in the last 2 months, I think, if perhaps even less, like Google and Microsoft, big announcement of next steps of quantum. So the quantum day or Q day might be much nearer than we are kind of thinking for the moment. The impact of quantum then on AI, what you mentioned, or asked about it as well, is an interesting one, because I always see AI as creating capabilities. It's creative. It can help you to give some input. It can review some of your documents or your output to kind of rephrase things. And that's why I kind of call it also an intelligent assistant. If you use AI as an intelligent assistant, you've got a very nice and very effective product or a help for your current processes. But then quantum will be empowering and accelerating it tremendously, that capability. So that's where it will be an interesting element. And yeah, that can be could potentially be partly scary if you think about that current encryption methods will be broken within minutes instead of within that many years that we won't even be aware of how we can pronounce that number. That's where it will be very interesting. Clearly a topic for another webinar, I'm sure. but it is, yeah, when quantum comes into place, things will be much, much faster than we can comprehend for the moment. So that's where I think AI and quantum will be something to get excited about, and at the same time wary for some parts in terms of the encryption. That's another topic for another time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm fascinated with everything that we've discussed. If I'm just summarizing with, I could keep talking about this for hours, but just to be clear, we've talked about investing in data infrastructure. So we're making sure that we are looking at the data quality, making sure that the governance is in there. Again, just my main focus in order to deliver the business value that that companies are looking for, and in doing that, we want to stay compliant, we want to stay ethical, looking at ISO standards and the EU AI Act and any sort of regulations that are going to eventually come into, if there are gaps that start coming up with quantum computing that we need to address in the future. And in order to make that happen, we're talking about developing on the existing talent within companies while ensuring that companies know that there are some experts in this brand new field that are going to support their endeavors in bringing AI into their company. Those are my key takeaways in the conversation. Is there, I think, Lee, did we cover the EU AI Act enough, or did you want to go into sort of like applications around it?
Yeah, let me just give the kind of a 1-minute breakdown in terms of the EU AI Act. It needs probably its own webinar completely on its own, but
yeah.
for now, just like really the key takeaways that I'd like everyone to kind of get is think of the regulation following a risk-based approach, and the risk-based approach is potential harm to individuals, health, safety, or sovereignty. Okay, so at the very top of the pyramid, you've got prohibited. So prohibited is essentially something that shouldn't hit the marketplace at all. And that would be things like real-time biometric identification in public spaces or the dreaded social scoring type system. Then directly below the prohibited, you've got high-risk AI. And that category has very strict rules about placing products into the product marketplace. And that would be around healthcare or critical infrastructure, or impacts healthcare or critical infrastructure. And the demands for governance in the management of those products is very high. So you have very high transparency requirements to ensure that you basically are minimizing harm and increasing safety, essentially. And the kind of things that you would typically want to have in place is conformity assessments, quality control around those products before they get to market. Then at the very bottom, you've got limited and minimal risk. So minimal risk type systems will focus mainly on transparency and as you're building out your various products. So the last piece that I want to just mention is around roles. So the Act actually specifies several roles, but the two most important ones are providers and deployers. So providers are those that develop and place AI products into a marketplace, and deployers are essentially those that use them. Now, just know that you can be both at the same time as well, just depending on how you're using or developing a product. So just be cognizant of that as you're going through it, but fundamentally there are two areas. And the obligations of those roles will depend on the AI that you're actually either developing or deploying. So again, just be very clear about that. And that is where the literacy program also should be supporting your various teams before it gets to the marketplace. But essentially, the EU AI Act really is looking at fostering trustworthiness, balancing that with innovation, because that was the big thing, with fundamental rights and product safety. So I think if you take nothing away from this, is that transparency is really key from the boardroom all the way down to the product. And very often you need to start with that AI policy, then roles and responsibilities, and you're bringing that down to your AI committee, which then will devise your risk areas, which will then set your strategy of where you're going with your various products and deployments and all the rest of it. And then all of the rest of the kind of controls and where you're going will then flow in behind all of that. So transparency is the word.
Fantastic. Great. So it's almost, without forcing companies to become open source, it's another way of making the models open source. And just like, listen, just tell us what you're trying to do, and within the company, of course. Wonderful. Yeah. And is there any particular key takeaways around the AI architecture that, Francesco, that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, so if there's one point I'd really like to hammer home is that you need to consolidate and take ownership of your data. This is crucial to get a competitive advantage in AI, not just in AI, but especially also in AI. And that with today's tooling, getting started and achieving actually meaningful results is much more accessible than many actually realize. It's not as hard as it used to be. And as AI rapidly becomes the standard across business workflows, organizations are going to have to centralize their data, and the ones that were proactive with it will secure a sustainable competitive advantage and unlock previously hidden business opportunities, like the client that I mentioned with the plant seeds. I do have to say that, however, the time to act is now. And you will find that organizations that delay may find themselves challenged to effectively leverage their valuable data assets as the barrier of entry gets higher. And that is because industry standards evolve and stuff does get harder with time. In other words, without proper integration, the potential goldmine of information you're sitting on may end up worthless while competitors extract full value from their data resources. So yeah, you should get started.
Was it data gold mines and monetization? Absolutely. I'm so grateful. I want to make sure before we close this off, Casper, any last thoughts?
I will keep it very short, but no, I think it's said before already as well. Ensure that you are aware of the opportunities you're trying to go for, taking into account the risk, the legislations, the quality, which is a basis of the data, is of course important for starting and making sure that you are making your decisions and seeing the opportunities based on relevant data, because if you have incomplete data, you might already miss some opportunities. So that's for me the thing. Really be well informed to ensure that you can identify the opportunities, taking into account the risk, the responsibilities, etc.
Wonderful. I'm so very, very grateful for you all. We've been speaking for an hour. To me, it's flown. I feel like we've only scratched the surface. So I want to thank all the attendees and just the panelists of experts who joined us for this hour. I have a feeling there's going to be a number of other webinars coming out of this, so we will follow up with all attendees. The webinar was recorded. We will share this for future viewing for anybody who couldn't make it today. Thank you all three. I have a feeling we're going to see each other again shortly. And please do follow up with us with anything that we could support your company with. So Casper, Lee, and Francesco, and for myself and from us in CubeMatch, thank you so much.